Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. You know that little piece of plastic sitting in your wallet right now? Well, today we're going to transform it from just a boring, everyday utility into a genuinely wild artifact of history, chaos, and human psychology. We're going to explore how a single, incredibly chaotic experiment birthed a trillion-dollar industry and what that simple swipe actually reveals about how your brain works.
To really grasp how we got here, we actually have to go all the way back in time to September 18th, 1958. This date marks a totally audacious, honestly unbelievable experiment known as the Fresno Drop. On this exact day, Bank of America blindly mailed out 60,000 live credit cards to completely unsuspecting households in Fresno, California.
I mean, just think about the sheer madness of that for a second. Thousands of ordinary people suddenly found that thousands of dollars in credit had literally dropped into their laps. With a $500 limit on each card, and to put that into perspective, that's about $5,000 today, this was essentially a bank heist in reverse. The whole shebang was masterminded by a middle manager named Joe Williams. And amazingly, there was absolutely no application process, no credit scoring, and zero approval mechanisms involved. This single astonishing event officially birthed the modern credit card industry, completely changing the American way of borrowing, paying, and budgeting forever.
So that sets the stage for Section 1, the Great Fresno Drop.
Which leads us directly into Section 2, a disaster in the making.
Because you see, this baby credit card sector, it wasn't the instant home run you might assume. Actually, it was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. To understand why, let's look at this timeline. Back in 1949, Diners Club launched a rather flimsy paper card meant just for hotels and restaurants. This eventually paved the way for that 1958 plastic BankAmericard rollout we just talked about, but the system wouldn't truly stabilize until a major digital rescue happened much later, in 1973.
And looking at the intramurs, it's easy to see why. The initial rollout of the Fresno Drop was a total catastrophe. The fallout was just severe. Delinquencies skyrocketed to over 20%, creating massive bad debt. Organized crime syndicates started exploiting the incredibly weak signature security, literally stealing cards straight out of the mail. On top of that, merchants absolutely hated the 6% commission fee they were being charged. The situation got so incredibly chaotic and unprofitable that just over a year later, Joe Williams, the head of the whole program, was forced to resign.
Moving on to Section 3, from chaos to Visa.
So how on earth did this failing experiment actually manage to survive? Well, enter a highly unlikely visionary named Dee Hock. The son of a utility line worker, Hock was managing a local Seattle bank's card program back in 1967. To save the collapsing industry, he dug into the very essence of money and executed 3 brilliant steps. First, he boldly convinced Bank of America to surrender ownership and control of their own licensing program. Second, he formed a brand new member-owned company. And third, he rebranded this global network in 1976 to a name you definitely know, Visa.
But he absolutely didn't stop there. Pushing his team relentlessly to beat competitors, Hock leveraged this brand new technology at the time, magnetic stripes and computer networks. This led directly to the 1973 launch of VisaNet. By ensuring the organization was the very first to fully digitize card transactions at the point of sale, Hock drastically cut down on fraud and basically enabled the frictionless 24/7 global commerce that we completely take for granted today.
Let's look at Section 4, the Chaordic organization. You see, the massive success of Visa relies on a really fascinating philosophy that Hock actually coined himself to scale this failing local bank experiment into a trillion-dollar global network. He called it Chaordic. It's exactly what it sounds like, a system or organization that seamlessly blends characteristics of both chaos and order. Hock deliberately built Visa as a decentralized, chaotic organization. He harnessed the fierce, incredibly chaotic competition of individual member banks, but he managed to contain it perfectly within the strict, absolute order of a shared, highly reliable payment network.
And honestly, Hock's personal philosophy was just as unique as his business model. He famously stated, "Through the years, I have greatly feared and sought to keep at bay the 4 beasts that inevitably devour their keeper: ego, envy, avarice, and ambition." True to this totally unique perspective, Hock shockingly resigned from his role at Visa in 1984. He just left all that corporate power behind to work a 200-acre ranch in total isolation on the Pacific Coast, happily trading money and position for liberty and contentment. Wild, right?
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the psychology of plastic.
So this history of external banking chaos actually feeds directly into the psychological chaos happening right now inside your own mind every single time you pull out that card. Traditional economists, relying on what's called the rational choice model, would argue that you swipe your card perfectly rationally, meaning you always act to maximize your utility, based on very stable preferences. But behavioral economics tells a very different story. Scientists in this field have proven that real consumers are actually prone to cognitive biases, mistakes, and highly unstable preferences. We simply do not always make decisions the way a perfectly rational model predicts.
In fact, academic critics frequently point out the incredibly seductive features of credit cards. These features subtly pave the way for incremental irresponsibility. Lured in by shiny short-term perks, consumers often rack up extensive debt burdens without even realizing the trap they're slowly walking into.
And why exactly does this happen? Well, we fall prey to a cognitive bias known as hyperbolic discounting. It's a behavioral phenomenon where individuals choose a smaller, immediate reward while completely ignoring the larger, long-term consequences. Basically, it means our preferences aren't actually stable over time, especially when a shiny, immediate reward is dangled right in front of our faces.
This creates what we can call a hyperbolic trap. Card issuers use short-term lures, things like zero annual fees, low introductory teaser rates, and travel points, to effectively dupe our psychology. We get so hyper-focused on these immediate perks that we completely ignore the long-term realities: massive high interest rates, a severely decreased quality of life, and in extreme cases, delinquency and bankruptcy.
Because our observed choices aren't always a reliable indicator of what's actually good for us, this sparks a major policy debate. Behavioralists are actively debating right now how the government should neutrally intervene to protect consumers from these deep, ingrained psychological blind spots.
Impartially looking at this debate, there are really two main camps. Hard paternalists want strict government interventions, like outright bans on card issuance, capping interest rates, or just completely eliminating rewards programs. Conversely, soft paternalists take a much lighter touch. They simply want better regulations on how information is actually presented to you, perhaps using publicly funded campaigns about overborrowing, guiding your choices without actually eliminating your options entirely.
Yet, despite all these psychological traps and intense regulatory debates, a former Federal Trade Commission chairman noted an absolutely undeniable fact: credit cards are one of the great innovations of the 20th century. Payment cards provide a safe, secure, and incredibly convenient alternative to cash that has fundamentally transformed how people live across all socioeconomic groups.
So, the next time you reach into your pocket to swipe, I leave you with this final question to ponder about your own financial behavior. Is the plastic in your wallet one of the greatest innovations of the 20th century? Or is it just a Chaordic trap of hyperbolic discounting? Keep that in mind, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.